Chapter 25. July 14th. I can't even begin to describe how horrible I feel. It's not like they're laying all around in the streets. In fact, the causeways on the island are all eerily vacant. I found what amounted to a home with a couple, a husband and a wife lying on their bed in the last position they were in before they died. Their bodies had decomposed a long time ago, and they basically were just clothes and bones. I got into this sort of frenzy after that, going from home to home, trying to find anything and anyone. Nothing. Nobody. They were all gone. After about the 6th or 7th home, I walked out the front door in a daze. I felt, well, that's just it. I didn't feel. I was numb with shock and grief. I didn't know what to think. I don't know how far I walked after that, but eventually I found what looked like a park and sat down. Looking back on it now, it seems strange how the park appeared to be well manicured, even though everybody is dead. I sat on a bench in the middle of the park. It was completely quiet, save for a small breeze that came along every now and then. Suddenly, out of nowhere, I heard a wail and realized it was coming from the depths of my own soul. Without warning, I suddenly broke down and wept uncontrollably, crying out at the top of my lungs. I yelled to everybody and nobody. All my bright hopes, all my wondrous dreams of actually visiting with an alien race, one as wonderful as this one was, had now been crushed. I was devastated and shattered at the knowledge of being denied something I had unknowingly wanted all my life. For a short time, I felt like I was coming home to meet my real brothers and sisters, only to now discover I was orphaned in the cosmos. From the deepest depths of despondency, I wept. I cried inconsolably for seemingly unending ages. I sometimes settled for a while. Then the image of that husband and wife would crash in on my consciousness. I thought about them laying in each other's arms as they mutually drew their last breath, and I would start weeping once again. Which one of them witnessed the last breath of the other? What pain did that one feel? In time, all that was in me was spent. My soul was empty. Suddenly, earth became suffocatingly small. My thoughts drifted from nothingness to nothingness, until they ultimately settled on my best friend, Corlin. I knew I had to tell her about what I had seen, but the prospect of sharing such terrible news with her was terrifying. If I had reacted so badly to this, how much more so would she? She, who was of these people herself. Yet, I knew I had to carry out this grim and despicable task. So I entered into the world of the amulet, and soon was standing before my friend. Before I could say anything, I saw in her eyes that she already knew all I was going to say. Apparently, when we got to the island, she was finally able to re-establish communication with all her sibling amulets, as she puts it. It was then they told her what had happened. It turns out that sometime in the 14th or 15th century, a plague had decimated the population of the island. I tried to determine how the plague got started, but the information was uncharacteristically vague. I was able to find out that once the plague started, they set up hospitals all over the island to handle the sick and dying, but it didn't seem to do any good. Within 2 months, the plague decimated the population until eventually the last Galimarian died, someone named Krelon. Ever since then, her brothers and sisters only had each other, and they had no hope of ever being reunited with their flesh and blood counterparts. They were all very despondent. Now, having met Corlin, they were astounded at the story she told them about me, and about humankind in general. After talking with Corlin for a while, I told her I had to go, and that I would come back soon. I came out of the amulet and once again ambled around the city for I don't know how long. Eventually, I made it back to my boat, which is where I am now. I'm completely exhausted. I think I'm going to make something to eat, then lay down for a while. I keep coming back to the same question in my mind. What do I do now? July 15th. I woke up this morning when it was still dark outside. With my hands wrapped around a hot mug and a blanket wrapped around my shoulders, I went up on deck and sat facing the east. I watched the irresistible forces of the cosmos graduate night into morning, eventually witnessing the first beams of light make their way over the horizon. Quietly, I stared into the distance and soaked in the stimulations to my senses. I tasted the deliciousness of my warm beverage. My ears listened to the insistent song of the ocean lapping against the bow, and my eyes drank in the symphony of light coming from the sun. As I closed my eyes, my hands relaxed, and yet held fast to the smooth texture of the coffee mug, while my nose twitched at the salty spray of the sea. My senses were acutely aware of my surroundings, and, with the advantage of a full night's sleep, my mind was better able to contemplate the events of the previous day. I thought about how more and more I seemed to identify with these people. More and more, they had become my own brothers and sisters. I felt as if I was a long-lost orphan who had finally found her family, only to discover they had died so long ago. For a moment, I was angry. I was mad at the injustice of what these people had been through to come to this planet, how resilient they were in overcoming such terrible reverses of fate, only to have their lives stolen from them by an unseen microscopic assailant. It wasn't fair. They didn't deserve it. Without the same ferocity as the day before, yet perhaps with a greater concentration of emotion, a lone tear found a troubled path down my cheek. After a while, I thought about what they had left behind, and about how nobody would ever know just how amazing these people really were. But then I thought, wait a minute, I'm here. I know about them. Am I going to let their memory die with me? Am I just going to leave and allow the injustice to continue by remaining silent and mute? Will I dishonor them by allowing their memory to fade into the mire and humiliation of anonymity? No, I cannot, will not let that happen. As I sat there on the deck of my boat, I decided to become their spokesperson. I felt driven to speak for them. These people were now my brothers and sisters, my mothers and fathers. Would I do anything less for my blood family? No, I had to speak for them, so all could know them. I had to make their death mean something. More specifically, I had to make sure their life meant something. Standing up from my chair on the deck, I realized I was now standing up in more ways than one. I was now Galimarian in my heart, and I was now going to speak for my brothers and sisters. I immediately told Corlin of my new conviction. With eyes that spoke a profound sense of gratitude, she placed her right hand on my right shoulder, and closing her eyes, gently bowed her head. A Galimarian gesture of profound respect and thanks. July 16th. After resolving yesterday to be their spokesperson and to chronicle all I could, I decided to spend the rest of my time on this island documenting as much as possible. I only have a little over 2 weeks to know as much as I can about them, and if I am now Galimarian in spirit, then I will live as they live. I will be at one among these people. Yesterday, I planned for the most profound archaeological expedition of my entire life. While preparing my mind and body for the task at hand, I put together a backpack with all the staples I would need in case I didn't make it back to the boat at all for the next 2 weeks, although that probably wouldn't be the case. I put on all necessary clothing, packed food and water, and made sure I had fresh batteries for the thousands of pictures and videos I planned on taking. After leaving the boat with my pack, and as I was walking along, I thought about how I'm now identifying myself as a Galimarian. If I'm a Galimarian now, I need to look and dress the part. I had spent enough time with Corlin to know how I should look and dress. So, I returned to the original home I went to when I arrived and found outfits the woman had worn when she was alive. Before doing so, I approached their withered bodies and silently paid my respects to their memory. Even though there was nobody to hear me, I explained out loud that I was making it my aim to ensure their deaths are not in vain, and I asked for permission to wear her clothes. I envisioned the woman nodding her head with her hand on my shoulder, showing her agreement and gratitude. Within no time at all, I looked at myself in the mirror and saw the persona of a beautifully dressed Galimarian woman. When I started trying on the clothes, I wondered if I would find a garment which would fit my tall frame. Being 6'3", I usually had trouble finding the right outfit, but that didn't pose a problem here. Galimarians were tall, and the ensemble I tried on fit me like a glove. As I looked at myself in the mirror, I wished Corlin could see me. The outfit was a beautifully wrapped garment worn over the shoulder, draping down my body and around my torso. At home, I would never have worn this, since it was so sheer. All I had underneath could be seen, yet, at the same time, tastefully obscured. It was obvious the Galimarians didn't have body image issues. Strangely, neither did I. More and more of their thinking was progressively becoming my own. I spoke to Corlin for a bit, telling her of the preparations I had made, including me being dressed as a Galimarian. I said I was sad she couldn't see the real me, and that's when she told me it was possible. She explained how every home had an island access portal that allows communications and complete access to the repositories of Galimarian knowledge. She said if I placed the amulet in the receptacle on top of the portal, she would be able to talk to me and access their version of a camera to see me. I was so excited to do this I couldn't wait. I exited the amulet immediately and searched for the portal. The Galimarian home I was in was modest, by the standards of many. After walking through the front door, there was a seating area which had been beautifully decorated once. Time had claimed its tidiness. There was quite some dust on the furniture. I could see in the left front corner of the living room what looked like a desk. On the top of it was their version of a computer. As Corlin had described, the top of the computer had that cradle, and I saw how the amulet would fit perfectly in its hollow. As soon as I placed it in the cradle, I heard a tone from the amulet, which is something Corlin said she would do when I had properly made the connection. The screen below the cradle now lit up. It was caked with 700 years of dust, so I got a cloth to wipe it clean. Within seconds, I saw materializing on the screen the familiar face of my best friend. She had a look of someone seeing something they had never seen before. When I spoke, she immediately showed her true self, the one I had come to love as a close friend. "Hello, my friend," I said to the screen. "Terry, is that really you?" "It's me." Corlin spent time looking at me without saying a word, and I sat there smiling back at her. I then got up and stood behind the chair I was sitting in, and timidly did a twirl so she could see me, all of me. I wanted my best friend to know the real me, the true me. After standing there for a bit, I sat back down and just looked at her. I thought about how, over a relatively short period of time, this woman had both figuratively and literally crawled into my head and become one with me. She was my best friend, and she was my soul sister. I truly loved her as one of my own family. Apparently, she felt the same way. Terry, I am overwhelmed to meet you for the first time. I've met you before, but now I am meeting the real you. I have to admit, I didn't know what to expect when I saw you for the first time, but I wasn't prepared for this. You, my sister, are beautiful. My heart swelled to hear her say this, she who was so stunning in my opinion. Thank you, my friend. I truly appreciate you saying that. I must say this garment makes me feel beautiful, too. Well, if I can borrow a phrase you've used before, you wear it well. You truly wear it well. Thank you. This terminal is an amazing device, allowing you to see me like this. There's so much more you haven't seen, replied Corlin. With this terminal, or any other like it on the island, you now have the ability to access the sum total of all knowledge on New Galimar. Every home has a terminal like this one, and with your knowledge of the Galimarian language, you can learn anything you wish. Perfect. That is exactly what I wish to do. Well, my beautiful student, what do you wish to learn? I was thinking about that. 2 days ago you told me that you had talked with your brothers and sisters, and they told you that when the Galimarians died, eventually it all came down to one last individual. What was his name again? His name was Krelon Telendor, replied Corlin. Do you think he would be a good place to start? There couldn't be a better place to start. Krelon was one of the most respected of Galimarians. He was one of the original Galimarians who came to Eden from our home planet. He was an archivist, and it was his role to record, detail, and authenticate the history of our people, both historical and modern. Learning about him and what he recorded would be the best way to learn about our people. Can you show me how to get to his home or his office? Office? I mean, where he did his work. Oh, yes, of course. He would have done all his work from his home. So that is where we should go. Perfect. How do I get there? This should help you, replied Corlin enigmatically as she gestured to the left of the screen. Next to the terminal was a flat surface on top of the desk. This surface was raised up about 2 inches taller than the rest of the desk. There wasn't anything on top of it other than dust, but then I saw it light up for a moment. Within 5 seconds, the dust disappeared, and a sheet of paper magically appeared out of thin air. Picking up the sheet, I could easily see that it was a map. That was impressive, I said with reverence. There is so much still to teach you, my friend. I suppose there is. Okay, off I go. I'll bring you up when I get there, okay? Corlin smiled and dipped her head as I grabbed the amulet out of its cradle. Her image faded from the screen, and I was once again on my own. Gathering up my things and emerging into the sunlight, I immediately struck out for the home of Krelon. As I walked along, I knew that even though the sun was out and it was a beautiful day, I could be out in the sun all day with no ill effects. It is a little hard to explain, but the existence of the shield was noticeable, even though there was no difference in the amount or hue of light hitting the ground. As I walked along, I passed the park where I had stopped that fateful day after discovering what had happened so long ago. As I passed the park, I was startled to see movement. Looking closer, right there all around the park, I was amazed to discover what amounted to robots manicuring the entire area. I remembered how, at the time, it was strange to me the park looked like it had been taken care of, even though there wasn't anybody alive to do so. The sight of the robots explained it perfectly. I passed the park, then backtracked. Remembering that my goal was to document everything, I got out my camera, snapped several pictures, and shot some video as I watched them perform their duties. Continuing on, I followed the map past several structures that I decided to investigate later. One of them was an office building or skyscraper of some sort. The outside of it appeared to be made of mirrors, but didn't seem to have a door anywhere at all. I decided to go near the edifice to see if there was a way I could look through the glass to see what was inside. As soon as I got near the mirrored wall, it vanished and became an entryway into the building. Shaking my head back and forth and letting out a sigh, I decided today I couldn't be sidetracked. I realized there would be no way to learn all there was about this place in the 2 short weeks I had left. I began to feel a bit overwhelmed. As I backed away from the wall, it closed up and once again became a mirrored glass wall. I passed more and more edifices, each presenting their own mysteries and riddles, each beckoning explanation. By the time I finally reached the home of Krelon, I was beginning to get a headache over everything I was attempting to cram into my brain. As with the first home I found, the door immediately opened as I approached and I walked in. I guess Galimarians didn't feel the need for locks on doors in their society. The more I thought about it, why would an amazingly enlightened society need locks? What would they be trying to hide? If privacy was something appropriate, then an enlightened soul wouldn't encroach on that in the first place, would they? Going into the house, I decided it was appropriate to pay my respects to Krelon, the inhabitant of this home. I slowly made my way to the bedroom. As was the case with all other homes I had been in up to this point, I saw laying on the bed the remains of a Galimarian man who had died over 700 years ago. Folding my hands together in front of me, I dipped my head with my eyes closed in quiet respect. I stood there for 5 minutes before saying, "I thank you for allowing me into your home, Krelon. With respect, I wish you peace wherever you are." Backing out of the room, I then went to the computer terminal and placed my amulet in the cradle. Within 10 seconds, the face of my friend appeared on the terminal. "I see you made it to the home of Krelon," said Querlin. "I thought what you said was a very nice gesture." "You could see that?" "Yes. One of the things available to me is the ability to monitor all activities on the island. I don't see a video like I do now, but I can see the movement of all who are alive on the island. And since you are the only one here, that makes your movements the most interesting set of events available for my siblings and me." "You mentioned your brothers and sisters before. How many of them are there?" I asked. "Before the plague, there were approximately 1,200,000 people living here, and each had their own amulet of understanding, carrying an individual like myself." "Are they all named Querlin?" "No." She laughed the laugh of a parent when a child asks an embarrassing question. "Each sibling chooses their own name, the same as each Galimarian chooses their own name when they are given an amulet of understanding. Even though the memory engrams for each amulet start out the same, we have our own set of experiences which mold and shape our personalities. Over time, we become very different and unique from each other. We even take on distinctive visual appearances for ourselves." Once again, I was quite impressed. I suppose I should be used to that. So, this is the home of Krelon. Do you have a picture of him? I asked Corlin. Yes. Immediately the screen faded into a picture of an amazing specimen of male attractiveness. This particular image was of a Galimarian man dressed in what I would typically think of as beach attire. The small bathing suit was worn by a body sculpted and chiseled, better than I could ever expect. "Is this the way he looked when he died?" I inquired. "Yes," said Corlin, even though I couldn't actually see her at the moment. "Did he always dress like that?" "No. Here's another image of him with more clothes on, if the other makes you uncomfortable." Blushing, I said, "No, I wouldn't say it made me uncomfortable. I was just wondering." The next image was of him wearing a different outfit, just as beautiful, the perfect complement to his perfect physique. This had the added benefit of showing him in what looked to be a social setting with a few other people. They were enjoying an evening around a fire, and smiling at something just said by one of them. They each had some sort of beverage in their hands, and it looked to be the perfect sort of gathering amongst a set of healthy 30-somethings. "How old is Krelon?" I asked. Without thinking it through, I expected to hear he was something like 35. "In this picture, Krelon is the equivalent of 6,627 trips around your sun." I was stunned. I stared at the image for a while, and I just couldn't believe he was actually that old. After a few minutes, Corlin spoke up. "I see that wasn't the answer you expected?" "I didn't realize you were still able to see me." No, that wasn't what I expected. In my world, our life expectancy is so much shorter. Individuals who look like this are only about 35 years old, and the oldest we ever make it to is around 100 years. To hear Krelon is that old, with no doubt so much more life ahead of him, is astounding. It is the way of the Galimarians. Perhaps we might be able to help you with your own life expectancy." "Really? Wow, I hadn't thought about that." "All in good time," Corlin answered. Deciding it was time to get down to the task of learning as much as possible about these people, I determined to press forward. "So, my friend, what did Krelon have that will allow me to learn about your people?" Corlin began showing me how to access the archives of knowledge Krelon maintained in his home. I was also told how to access the archives for all of New Galimar. For now, I knew this was all I could handle. I spent the rest of the day here until this moment when I am writing this journal before I go to bed. I have decided to sleep in Krelon's home, so I cleaned a place for myself on a couch, and that's where I will bed down for the night. Wow, what a day. July 17th through July 20th. Over the last several days, I've been learning an incredible amount of history about the Galimarians. They are truly an amazing people. The way they think, the way they work hard, yet search out the most exquisite of life's experiences is truly inspiring. When I watched a video of their version of a music concert, I anticipated the music would be good, but I had no idea how good it actually would turn out to be. After thinking about it, though, imagine how good you would get if you have several thousand years to practice your craft, all the while getting better and better at your art. Eventually, your ability would be phenomenal, as was the case with the music artist featured in this particular recording. The recordings from Krelon that I watched had a certain flavor I came to recognize as his own specific slant on the events he was recording. I noticed that while he was as factual as you would expect from a person in his position, he would sometimes allow his own viewpoint to come through. I wondered if there were any other recordings that didn't necessarily have to do with his official capacity as an archivist, but rather were of just him in general. I wanted to dip below the surface of the facts and really touch the personalities of the individuals. I placed Corlin in the cradle and was soon rewarded with her smiling face looking back at me. "Hello once again," she said. "How are you today?" "I'm fine. How—" I started laughing. "What is so funny?" she asked. "I was just about to ask you how you slept." Corlin smiled a very bright and wide smile. "As you probably would expect, I don't have the need for sleep. Still, I appreciate the friendly thought behind your question, so I will say I slept fine." We both laughed at my oversight and her accommodation. "Corlin, I've been wondering about something." "What is it you wish to know?" "I've been learning so much about the history of your people, but I want to go deeper. I want to know more about the individuals themselves. How would you suggest I do that?" Corlin paused for a moment and looked like she was thinking that over. Finally, she replied, "I think the best way to do that would be to view the personal logs of some of the people. Perhaps Krelon would be a good place to start." "They have personal logs?" "Yes. It was a very common practice for each person to keep a personal log." "So, Krelon kept a diary, huh? Wouldn't that be a private thing he wouldn't want me to read?" "I'm not familiar with this word diary you've used, but if you're speaking about the personal logs, it is never common practice to hide such things from any who want to read. The basis of an enlightened society is the open and honest exchange of information and knowledge. Enlightenment has taught us the only ones who want to hide things are those who have not attained true peace and harmony with the universe. Honesty and openness are hallmarks of those who are peaceful and peaceable. All in this society live in complete harmony with each other, so there is never anything to hide." Seeing there is no reason to object, I asked Corlin to show me how to access Krelon's personal logs. This should be interesting. July 21st through July 24th. For the last 3 days straight, I have been listening to the personal logs of Krelon. I have been mixing in the general knowledge recordings he made as an archivist, and more I have been looking forward to listening to him talk about what he thinks about this or that. A side effect of all the listening I've been doing is I'm starting to realize I've been spending all my time indoors, and yet there is a vast city that should be explored as well. Before doing so, I asked Corlin what would be the best way to get around in a city this big. She smiled and said she had a surprise for me, which would be waiting outside. Gathering up the amulet and hanging it around my neck, I emerged from the front door of Krelon's home. As soon as I did, I looked to the left, and coming down the causeway that ran in front of his home was what can only be described as a vehicle of sorts. It didn't have wheels, yet moved smoothly over the ground with a graceful hum. When it stopped in front of me, the side door of the vehicle opened. Inside, there was a bench seat. I slipped in, and as soon as I did, the door closed behind me. In front of me was another cradle for my amulet. After placing it in the cradle, Corlin appeared on the windshield and asked me where I would like to go. "I'm a little overwhelmed. I don't really know what the possibilities are." Thinking about it, I said, "Tell you what, let's make today a day where you give me a tour of the city. You decide what you want me to see. What do you say?" "That sounds delightful," responded Corlin with glee. The car smoothly started moving forward. Without thinking, I turned around to make sure there wasn't any oncoming traffic. then silently berated myself for acting like a New Yorker here on an island where I'm the only living being. Rolling my eyes, I looked forward again. Like the most amusing and engaging tour guide, Corlin took me on the most amazing tour of the island. New Galimar was subdivided into smaller sections that had their own names like Meropa, Mundi, New Ceres, Baja, and another area called Dobrynia. Corlin explained that each of these areas had evolved their own culture, their own music, and their foods that reflected such amazing diversity it was impossible to experience it all. I remember at one point, when it was getting to be a little after the noon hour, I started to get hungry. I told Corlin that, in my haste to get out of the house, I neglected to bring anything to eat with me. Believe it or not, she actually apologized to me. She confessed she doesn't have to think about food at all, but then said she had just the things she thought I would like. We stopped at the mirror-faced building I had seen about a week ago, the one which had the glass panel which disappeared when I approached it. She told me to go inside, then find an elevator. She would watch where I was, and instruct the elevator to go where I needed to go. I approached the mirrored wall, and it dissolved again. I entered a beautifully crafted lobby, and proceeded to the lift at the other end of the room. As I approached, the doors opened, and I entered. The doors closed, and I was quickly lifted up. In no time at all I emerged on the outside of the building, traveling in a glass container along the side of the building, until I reached the top floor. I had been in elevators like this in New York, but I must say I had never been this far up off the ground. Until this moment, I had never experienced buildings this tall. Before it had been attacked, I had been to the restaurant at the top of the World Trade Center. But this was at least 2 or 3 times as tall. My breath was taken away as I gazed out over the expanse of the city beneath my feet. When I arrived at my destination floor, the door opened, and I entered a beautiful lounge. As I strode over to the windows on the far side of the room, I saw the incredible vista of the sea beyond the island. To my right was what amounted to a conversation pit, and in the middle of it was a table with, once again, an amulet cradle. I inserted mine, and this time I was rewarded with an amazing holographic representation of Corlin hovering above the table. I have to say, Corlin, these amulets and cradles are pretty handy. Indeed, that was one of the hallmarks of convenience in our society. As I looked at her, I saw her eyes falter, as if there was something taking her attention away for a moment. "What is it?" "It's my siblings," she replied, somewhat reluctantly. "What about them?" She almost stammered for the first time. "They have been alone for so long, and haven't had any interaction with any living person. They want to meet you." "Run that past me one more time?" I asked, getting excited. "Well, I have been asked by many of them if they could meet you. They have been without any interaction with an actual living, breathing being for so long, and they desire to do so. When they learned you are human and not Galimarian," she faltered, yet with a smile added, "by birth, that is. Even more of them were intrigued. I told them I didn't know if you would be open to that, but I promised I would ask." Her comment intrigued me. "Why do you think I wouldn't be open to that?" "I know it's been overwhelming and disappointing to discover that all the Galimarians you wished to meet are gone now, and coupled with being so intent learning about the Galimarians from the documents and videos, I thought it might have been too much for you to deal with, meeting them." I could see her point, and it was sweet of her to have this kind of consideration for me, but in reality I was very excited at the prospect of meeting her brothers and sisters. "I would love to." "Really?" she replied. "I didn't want to overwhelm you with too much right away." "No, I really want to. How can we do it?" "The easiest way would be for you to enter the amulet. Then I will invite them to come for a visit." "You can do that?" A dumb question by now. "Yes, of course. Just come on in." I immediately picked up the amulet, made the necessary strokes to the screen, and was once again transported into the world of Corlin. Once I got there, Corlin walked up to me and said she had a group waiting for me. We walked until we arrived at what was almost an exact replica of some of the structures on the island. We walked into a building that proved to be a massive amphitheater. And guess who was the guest speaker? I was led onto a stage by Corlin, and there in front of me were thousands of beautifully and remarkably dressed Galimarians. I was dumbstruck. As I walked out to the middle of the stage, a panel opened up in the middle of the stage floor, and a clear glass lectern ascended. I walked up to it, placed my hands on each side, and looked out over a hushed audience as the faces of thousands of interested Galimarians looked back at me. I thought for a moment about the first thing I should say, and a quote from a book I was recently reading came to mind. A great thinker in my world once said, "The true sign of intelligence is not knowledge, but imagination." Intelligence is all around me in everything I see here. It is in the way you live, the way you interact with each other and with me, the marvelous technology, and the way this technology seamlessly intermingles with the environment, allowing all of you to live and allowing me to visit you. This speaks to an amazing intellect that is a marvel to behold. But beyond this intelligence, I have had a fleeting glimpse into a world that shows this technology is one where the good of society and the way such technology is used is only limited by the imagination. From what I've seen, this imagination seems boundless. Take yourselves, for instance. While it is true that you are the embodiment of technology, still, I see how you are much more than the sum of your circuits and algorithms. You are living. You are sentient. You love, you explore, and you question. You are self-aware. Something another great thinker from my world once said is, "I was like a boy playing on the seashore, and diverting myself now and then, finding a smoother pebble or a prettier shell than ordinary, whilst the great ocean of truth lay all undiscovered before me." You are a great ocean of truth, and I hope to learn from and bring honor to your society. It is evident that a hallmark of this world, and the people who created it, was not just intelligence in unlocking the secrets of the universe, but rather the ability to create such an amazing architecture of society based on an incredible amount of imagination. I stand before you as an individual who is awestruck at what the people of Galimar have created. Yet, at the same time, I also stand before you, a person incredibly sad at the events leading up to today. May I express my sorrow and my condolences over the heartache you all have experienced. It is my sincere hope that you find peace in the lives you lead from now on. At this point, I said, "Are there any questions you would like to ask me?" As if they had all rehearsed ahead of time who would speak in turn, one in the front row stood up and said, "My name is Minlay, and I am of the siblings of Meropa. We would like to ask you to tell us about where you come from and what your life is like there. Beginning with that question, I told them all about New York, how many people are there. I didn't hold anything back either. I told them all the good things and all the bad things. I did this because I have learned that keeping things secret is a form of deception, a form of lying. I wouldn't want anybody to lie to me, so I wouldn't want them to feel they had been deceived in any way. I also made sure to explain all the good things in human society. I described notable people of virtue who simply want to do good to each other in life. I explained this was the way I was raised, by hard-working parents who instilled in me values centered around respect for my fellow man. The questions continued and touched on things I didn't really know much about. The personality of each of the brothers and sisters closely mirrored the personalities of the Galimarian who wore their respective amulet. Some of the questions centered around the technology of humans, a subject I am woefully unqualified to discuss, to botany, biology, and our history. I was a little more prepared to answer that last one, having been trained as an archaeologist. Eventually, the questions slowed down. I have a question for you now, I said. I have been spending a lot of time reviewing the personal logs of and the histories chronicled by an archivist named Krelon Telendor. Is there a brother or sister here who was his companion? With one accord, all heads turned toward a location about 3/4 up the audience to the right. One lone sister stood and said, "My name is Lorana, and I was Krelon's companion." Lorana, if you don't mind, I would like to talk to you personally when this meeting concludes. As you wish. From this distance, I couldn't quite see her face, but the tone of her voice seemed friendly. About this time, Corlin appeared next to me and spoke up. My brothers and sisters, this concludes our visit with Terry for today. If there are any further questions for her, or if you wish to have a personal audience, please contact me in the usual manner. Thank you. All stood. Each and every one of them stretched their arms up and away from their bodies. Reaching above their heads, they put their palms together, and, while keeping them together, brought their hands down over their hearts, while bowing their heads with eyes closed. Once they completed this maneuver, they spontaneously erupted in applause, all directed toward me. Corlin and I retreated from the stage and went outside to talk. I told her that the experience was far from draining, and I thanked her for bringing me there. I saw her eyes falter for a moment. Then she looked at me and said, "Lorana is asking if you would like to talk to her now." "Yes, I would like that very much." With a slight nod, Corlin raised her wrist in an open-palmed gesture to look behind me, and that's when I heard a voice say, "Hello, Terry. I'm Lorana." I think in the outside world, I would have been deeply startled, but in here, I seem to be better at handling surprises. Perhaps I was on surprise overload or something. I turned around and came face to face with a very tall representation of my friend Lynn. Now, this was something which took me aback. I definitely hadn't expected to see her here. "Lynn?" I asked. "No, Terry, I'm Lorana. Corlin shared some of the images you have shown her, and I thought it might be easier to talk to me if you were talking to someone you already knew. Does it upset you?" "No, it doesn't upset me at all." But after thinking about it a little, I said, "Actually, my goal in being on the island is to learn as much as possible about Galimarians. I would like to see you as you normally present yourself, not as my Earth friend, if that's okay." Corlin spoke up, saying, "I told you so." Lorana smiled at her sister, as if she had just lost a bet. And in an instant, her facade changed from that of Lynn to a face I had never seen before. As with Corlin, Lorana was beautiful, with delicate features which were the embodiment of feminine power. "I hope this is more to your liking," said Lorana. "So long as this is the real you, then it is definitely to my liking." "I'm glad to hear that. What can I do for you, Terry?" As I said in the discussion, I have been spending a lot of time learning about Galimarians by studying the writings of Crelon. I have also been studying his personal logs, both written and video. I was wondering what you could tell me about him that isn't on those recordings. Crelon was an amazing person. It has been my privilege to be part of his life ever since he attained the age of enlightenment. For over 6,000 years, I have watched him grow from an adolescent to an adult to a respected member of Galimarian society. I have seen him hone his skills. No one has his ability to capture the essence of the scene unfolding before him. He is quite well adapted to the field he has chosen. I nodded. I would have to agree with you on that. I've been enjoying his recordings very much, but I want to know something else. It seems that while he is rather amazing in his field of study, I can also sense he is... How can I put this delicately? She let me think for a while to come up with the right word. The three of us walked along some shade trees outside of the amphitheater complex where I had just spoken. We were engaged in a relaxed stroll, finally coming to a set of benches where we all sat down. She continued, allowing my thoughts to proceed unabated. I can also sense he is somehow lonely. Lorana gave a slight grin, then turned her gaze down to the ground. You are very discerning, since I know for a fact he took great pains to never actually discuss that in his writings and recordings. He and I talked about it extensively, but he never wanted to reveal this in his logs. He always said that while he very much wanted a mate to spend his life with, one he could treat with the utmost honor, respect, and love, he wanted this mate to reveal herself to him. With a look I couldn't quite interpret, Lorana said, "Interesting." "What's interesting?" asked Corlin. On several occasions, he told me the perfect one for him would see, through all his writings, what his desires were, and one day reveal herself to him. You, Terry, are the only one who has been able to break through the surface of what he wrote and see the real Crelon. He is a loving, gentle, kind, phenomenal person. Her face then took on a pained look. It was evident she realized her error. That is, he was loving, gentle, and kind. It pains me to meet you under these circumstances, when he is no longer here. I put my right hand on her right shoulder and closed my eyes and dipped my head. I wanted her to understand I appreciated her letting me know what she did, even though it brought her pain. Thank you, Lorana. Thank you for giving me this glimpse into the life of a remarkable member of your world. Of course, Terry, if there is anything else you would like to know, please do not hesitate to ask. Corlin will know how to contact me. Thank you, Lorana. My love and respect go with you. And mine with you, Terry. She quickly faded, and only Corlin and I remained. Looking over to her, I asked, "What time is it in the outside world? It seems like I've been here for hours." "You have," she responded. "According to the way you represent time in your world, it is approximately 2:30 a.m. I should leave and get some food and some more conventional sleep. Then hit it again in the morning, if that's all right with you." "What are you going to hit?" asked Corlin with a worried look on her face. Laughing, I responded, "Don't worry. That's just an expression in my world, meaning I'm going to hit the hay, do a faceplant, ride the good ship Z. All just colloquialisms that essentially mean I'm going to go to sleep." With a relieved look on her face, she said, "That's good to hear. And to answer your earlier question, of course it is fine with me. I look forward to your return." With that, I glided my finger across my amulet and was instantly returned to the real world, where I could tell it was the middle of the night. After making my way back to Creelon's dwelling, I bedded down, but not before writing this journal entry. I wanted to write all this down before I forgot any of it. I thought about Creelon. It figures. My soulmate is an alien with a perfect body and the perfect attitude of how to treat a woman, but one who has been dead for 700 years. Rolling my eyes, I drifted off to dreams of my perfect man. July 25th. This morning, as I was taking care of hygiene and food needs before starting my day, did I mention they have showers just like at home? I thought about Creelon and how he seemed to be what I have always looked for in a man. Visually, he's very attractive, but I've been around the block enough times to know beauty is really only skin deep. As far as I'm concerned, I don't care what the guy looks like if he treats me right. If he demonstrates his whole world revolves around me, and I'm all that matters to him when we are together, then he's my definition of the perfect man. Like last night, this earned another sigh. As I finished getting ready, I decided to alter slightly how I finish out the rest of my time on the island. Emerging from the back rooms, I came to Creelon's desk and placed my amulet into the cradle. As I waited for Corlin's face to appear, I reached down to my pack on the floor where I had some protein bars stored. "Good morning, Where'd you go?" Corlin asked, when all she could see was what appeared to be an empty chair. I straightened up and suddenly appeared in the chair. "I'm here," I said, smiling. "There you are. How are you? Did you sleep well?" "I did, thank you. And how did you sleep?" "I slept fine, thank you." We both laughed. "You know," Corlin continued, "I have to say one thing about you, Terry. If I didn't know better, I'd say you were truly Galimarian with the way you approach life. Perhaps that is why I didn't ever suspect you weren't Galimarian at the beginning." "What do you mean by my approach to life?" "Well, a hallmark of enlightened societies is the ability to live, love, and laugh. These are traits you have in abundance, my friend, and I think that is why you and I have become such fast friends. I didn't have to love you as my friend and sister, but in your case, I simply didn't have the choice. Your personality has always been irresistible. I am blessed to have you in my life." I was quite taken back. Wait a minute. Here you are, an enlightened soul, telling me you are blessed to have me in your life? Are you kidding me? I am blessed to have you in my life. Thank you, Terry. I guess we now have the beginnings of a very exclusive mutual admiration society. We laughed at this, the normal way of our interactions these days. Corlin, talking with you feels so natural. It's almost like you've always been in my head and in my heart. I never knew you existed until I put on the amulet, but now I can't imagine not having you in my life. I know what you mean. This isn't the first time this has been the case. I've had many conversations with my brothers and sisters about this, and the general opinion is that our original creator, the designer of the amulets, put something in the programming which causes us to be identified with our companions. It's almost as if the amulet reads the memory engrams of the wearer and shapes our personality to perfectly match the personality of the wearer. If that is true, then this is even more advanced than most other technologies known by me. I shook my head. Amazing. Corlin nodded her head. After a few moments had passed, I told Corlin my idea when I was getting ready this morning. I thought about proposing a slight change in the way we approach my knowledge quest. How is that? Instead of sequestering myself inside for days at a time, I should split up my time between studying the written records and actually touring outside the city. I need to rely on you to show me as much as possible. How does that sound? That sounds ideal. What would you like to do first? I'd like you to show me some pictures of Krelon. Corlin looked at me with a cheeky smile. July 26 through 31. I realize I haven't written in my log for quite some time. Over the last several days, I've been taking thousands of pictures and videos as I ventured deeper and deeper into the world of New Galimar. But I've been so intent on experiencing as much as possible. I've neglected writing in this chronicle. I gotta stop doing that. After spending time this morning learning about New Galimar's governmental structure and how it was modeled on the structure of government on Galimar, I asked Corlin to take me to its main seat, the meeting chambers for the Grand Council of New Galimar. As we were traveling, the car was silent for a while until Corlin broke the silence. I'd like to ask you a question. Would that be all right? Of course, Corlin. You know you don't need to ask. After a few moments, she continued, After yesterday, I seem to get the impression your interest in Krelon goes beyond a professional curiosity. Boy, you don't beat around the bush, do you? Which bush are you talking about? There aren't any plants in our vicinity that qualify as a bush, and I don't know what you mean by beat. Stop, I said, laughing. It's just another one of those expressions. You're going to have to get used to my using a lot of them. The expression beating around the bush means using evasive questions that don't touch on the real information being sought. I see. No, I'm not one to beat the bush, she replied. Beat around the bush, I corrected her. Sorry, not one to beat around the bush, she conceded. To answer your question, I suppose you are right about my interest in Krelon. Is it that obvious? Corlin smiled. Yes, Terry, very obvious to me. Do you think you are falling in love with him? I shifted uncomfortably in my seat. Honestly? That hadn't hit me in so many words. I mean, I stammered for a moment. I guess I'd have to admit a part of me deep down is falling for him. The car became silent. Corlin sensed I needed to be alone with my thoughts at the moment, and she was right. Now that the subject had been brought out into the open, I could easily see, over the last several days, I've been falling deeper and deeper in love with Krelon. Separated by 700 years of history, I was the quintessential bird falling in love with a fish. Unrequited love. Seems like my lot in life. Knowing you as I do, Terry, I somehow don't think that will be permanent. Thank you, my friend. Somehow the realization that I'm in love with the perfect man of my dreams, and I'll never be able to meet him, is quite depressing, actually. The thoughts were now floating freely around in the vehicle, and I sat quietly as we sped along to our destination. I suppose that is the hallmark of a good friendship. Corlin didn't feel the need to break the silence, as I wrestled with my own menagerie of, what was it? grief over the death of my one true love? It's silly, but believe it or not, that's exactly how I felt. And over a guy I had technically never met. Like I said, silly, but there it is. Honestly, I don't remember much else that happened that day. August 1st. I got up this morning feeling sluggish. I took my customary shower, thinking that it would make me feel better, but my pain wasn't on the outside. It was in my heart. The only thing I could think of was to not deal with it. I got ready, ate, got my notes together, and placed Corlin in the cradle so we could talk about the activities for the day. I tried my best to put on a brave face for the day, knowing full well that, inside me, it felt like the death of my soul. After seeing Corlin's face on the screen, I did my best to face the day with bravery. Knowing my time on the island was winding down, I sat in Creelon's living room discussing the best use of it with her. There was a lull in the conversation. "Terry, I'd like to make a request of you." "What can I do for you, my friend?" It felt funny saying that to Corlin, since I was always the one asking her for things, and that was her standard response. "I'd like you to come visit me in the amulet. I have someone who would like to talk to you." "Okay, I'll be right there." I reached up and grabbed the amulet out of the cradle. When I did, Corlin's face disappeared from the screen. I stood up and straightened my clothes, as if I was just about to see her in this state, which was silly, and then sat down on the couch, getting comfortable. I entered the necessary keystrokes on the amulet, and with the same spectacular light show, I was transported to the amazing world of Corlin. She approached me, and, as has been the custom between us in the last several days, we embraced each other in a greeting hug. After leading me to a bench, she sat with her elbows on her knees, one hand holding the other. Looking intently in my eyes, she chose her words carefully. "Terry, during your entire time here, I have always been impressed with you. You have been remarkably single-minded in your resolve to learn all you could about the Galimarians. I have to admit, it has been rather flattering for all my siblings and me along the way. Your tenacity in how you approach your work has been unwavering." Something in me knew what was coming next. That is, until yesterday. There it was. I had tried to put on a brave face yesterday afternoon, but knew I had failed miserably. I wasn't focused at all, which was obvious to Corlin. "Terry, when we parted yesterday, I reviewed the recordings of our interactions that day, and it appears your perspective took a definite downturn when I asked you how you felt about Creelon. Am I right?" I dipped my head down. "Yes, as always, you are right. Yesterday when we parted, I had to come to terms with my feelings. I was dealing with what amounted to nothing less than terrible grief over the death of my perfect life mate. I know it's crazy, but the more I've learned about Creelon, the more I've completely fallen in love with him. And now, the realization that this person who was so perfect for me is someone I'll never meet is so overwhelming. I wish I could just have one moment with him to show him what I feel in my heart." Corlin reached her hand out and picked up my chin so she could see my eyes, which no doubt appeared as red, puffy, and moist as they could in the perfect world of the amulet. "My dearest Terry, you are such a tender and loving soul. I'm completely certain it wouldn't take Creelon more than 30 seconds to figure out you are the one he's waited for so long. I wish I could know for sure. There is no way to hear it from his own mouth, but I think you can benefit from the next best thing." "How?" Corlin's eyes shifted to the right, and, as I followed her gaze, my eyes landed on Laurana, Creelon's companion. With the grace I have come to expect from all Galimarians, and with a smile on her face, she came over and sat next to me. I was instantly drawn to her. "Oh, Laurana!" With more tears in my eyes, I reached out to her, and we embraced. I don't know how Corlin knew, but somehow she recognized I needed to have some sort of connection to Creelon, and Laurana was it. I cried like a baby on her shoulder, wetting it with my copious tears. "My dearest Terry," she whispered in my ear, "last night, after you and Corlin parted, she contacted me and relayed her conversation with you, and how concerned she was. She said you seemed distant and disconnected, and she thought a lot of it had to do with your feelings for Creelon." I grasped Laurana's hands in an attempt not to let loose of my surrogate connection to Creelon. "It's true. It wasn't until my wonderful friend here caused me to face my own feelings that I realized I have fallen head over heels in love with a man who I'll never meet. I'll never be able to feel his touch, or even hear whether he could possibly feel the same way for me. I've just felt so awful since then. My dear, there is nobody on this island, flesh and blood or virtual, who spent more time with Creelon than I did. Think about it. I had the opportunity to know him and his thoughts for over 6,000 years. I know, and there's a part of me that is slightly jealous of you. You needn't be. Not only can I tell you what he's told me, but remember, my personality is actually shaped by the personality of my companion, Creelon. Since this is true, I can tell you, without a shadow of a doubt, there has never existed any flesh-and-blood Galimarian who was a better match for Creelon than you, Terry. As you have spent your time here on the island, I have watched you closely. I have listened to your conversations with Corlin, and I have read your logs and your musings of how you and Creelon are soulmates. I'm here to tell you, Terry, I agree with you. Without reservation, I can assure you that you are Creelon's soulmate. You are the one he waited for. Hearing this, I didn't know how to react. On the one hand, here was someone who had the unique ability to tell me exactly how Creelon would think, and this person was telling me I am his perfect match. But, on the other hand, I was dying inside, under the crushing weight of the truth that I would never meet him. I was the happiest of happy and the saddest of sad at the very same time. My fantasy of happiness was laced with the poison of reality. I replied honestly, I don't know how to react. I'm happy that you feel that way, but I know I will never hear his own words to me. Don't be so sure, Laurana replied, with a glee seemingly misplaced in this setting. Why would you say that? She explained that, eventually, after looking for so long and not finding the right one for himself, he asked Laurana to look for his best match, since it was too painful to have his hopes dashed time and time again. She said in all her looking, she never found the perfect one for him, one who would see the real Creelon underneath all he wrote. I waited patiently, but that perfect soulmate never came. When that terrible day came 700 years ago, I was resigned that I had failed in fulfilling his request. Whereas others had someone to spend their last hours with, Creelon had nobody. This made me exquisitely sad. I dipped my head at hearing the loneliness he experienced at the end. Terry," Lorana continued. I looked her in the eyes again. "Long before he got sick, I asked him to chronicle what he would say to the one I might find to be his perfect mate, to write down what he would say to her on the day of their ceremony of union. He did that, Terry, only he did it as a manuscript, so it would only be read by his mate and no one else. Not even I know what it says, because there is no record in our archives of what he wrote. He even made me swear I would not reveal its existence to anybody except the individual I might find who is his one true love. Through the ages, I never found one single soul qualified to read that, until now, Terry. I want you to have the manuscript from Creedlon, from your soulmate." Then she gave me instructions to follow once I exited the amulet and returned to Creedlon's home. Anxious to see this manuscript, I hugged and thanked Lorana and Corlin for their friendship, and, promising to be back soon, quickly exited from the amulet. I stood up and went to the one room in the house I always avoided, the bedroom where Creedlon's body lay. I stared at it for a few moments, gathering the courage to go on. To the left of Creedlon, and above his head, there was a square-shaped panel in the wall, about 1 foot on all sides. As with other similar panels in the room, it emitted light whenever I entered. Following Lorana's instructions, I touched all 4 corners of the panel, and, when I did, it swung open, revealing a manuscript inside, rolled up and tied with a red ribbon. With trembling fingers, I grasped the 700-year-old document, then retreated into the living room to read it. Sitting down, I carefully untied the ribbon and unrolled the manuscript. The first line made me catch my breath. To my soulmate. When Lorana asked me to write this, I know it was her way of helping me keep alive in my heart something I had all but given up hope of ever finding, the one true love of my life. For thousands of years, I have searched for someone who was the perfect match for me, and Lorana has witnessed my disappointment time and time again. But now, by the fact that you are reading this, it would appear her optimism was well-founded, and she has succeeded where I had failed for so long. Do you have any idea how long I have waited for you? Do you have any idea how glad I am Lorana found you? I've always known I had so much to give to you, but I didn't know where you were. Millions of years wouldn't be enough time to express the depth of affection I have for you, or my happiness that my search is finally over. Please know this. Now that you have been found, you will always live in my heart. From now on, I will no longer be its owner, because from this point forward, my heart will be beating in your body. I vow to adore you, protect you, honor you, and most of all, love you for the rest of my days, even beyond my days. Please know in some way I am certain our love will live on forever. Please know that even if we are ever separated by time, space, or circumstance, we will be together once again. There will be nothing and no one who will ever keep us apart permanently. Your loving soulmate, Creedlon. By the time I finished reading his letter to me, I was a complete mess. With Lorana's input, I knew in my soul this letter was meant for me. It spoke from the heart and contained the words of a person who thought and felt as I always have. Once again, it was a very strange set of simultaneous feelings. I felt both an overwhelming sense of happiness and an irresistible and overpowering sense of sadness. I was pleased I now had this piece of Krelon, which was uniquely my own and no one else's. At the same time, I felt cheated, that I had no way of expressing my love back to him. When I came to this island, I had absolutely no idea I would be affected as deeply as I have. I thought this was going to be more of an intellectual experience, learning about the Galimarian people in my mind. I envisioned a society largely the same as I had come to know through the virtual experiences Corlin shared with me when I sat at her feet as a student all those nights in the museum's archive. The difference between what I expected and the reality couldn't have been more profound. My mind was stimulated, but my emotions have received an unexpectedly strenuous workout. Most nights I go to sleep exhausted. That isn't a complaint, though. Aside from the incredible friendships I have with Corlin and Lorana, I've now had the opportunity to find the one who is, or rather was, the love of my life. What does my own future hold for me now that I have, in a sense, met Krelon? I'm not sure, but in some strange way I must admit that while I'm sad I cannot be held in the arms of my love, a part of me has found a small sense of peace, knowing there actually was someone who was perfect for me, that it was possible someone would be perfect for me. I'm not sure if that would make sense to anybody reading this log in the future. As I think about it more, I'm gratified at becoming a better person because of my experiences. I came here thinking my visit would turn out so much differently than it did. On the whole, it has made me a better woman, more confident, self-possessed, and self-assured. For that, I thank the Galimarians. For as long as I live, I will never forget my Galimarian brothers and sisters, but especially I will never forget my one true love, my Krelon. It occurs to me that the mark of an amazing culture, long after it has ceased to exist, is its continuing ability to change the lives of people. Hey, fellow Galimarians, this is Dan Adrian, and I just wanted to say thank you for listening to my book. If you can, please click like down below because it really helps me bring these videos to you and lets me know what you like. Also, if you haven't already, please subscribe and click on the bell so that you'll get notified when I release more chapters. If you have any questions about this or any other of my books, or if you want to know more about what it takes to write a novel like this one, please make sure you leave your question in the comments below. Thanks again. I'll see you soon.